thank you for being here this morning. My name is Chiara Berzotti. I work for European Bioplastics, and we're here today for the European Bioplastic Talk number 2 of 2026. We're talking in this series about material solutions, bioplastics beyond the packaging, and we will talk today with 3 experts about textiles and fibers. So just a few things while we let people in and everybody is happy and settled down. European Bioplastic is an association that has been working in the field for more than 30 years. So our main role is actually to create a better framework for bioplastics in Europe. I'm also glad that some of the members are here today with us, so this is very good also for us to see that there is a high participation of our different colleagues from different consortia, but also member pool. Just few things. This format is funded by the European Union, so also you will see the flag of the European Union in several presentations here. The views and opinions that are reported today, they reflect necessarily those of the authors, but not those of the European Union, nor of European Bioplastic necessarily. Just a very, very quick disclaimer for you all to understand the settings. And the structure of these talks is the same that we used in the past. So we got one moderator, that's me. Then we got 3 experts today. So I'm very glad that we will cover different areas of the discussion around textiles and fibers, and for around 30 minutes of talks. And then we will enter the Q&A. The Q&A will be removed from the final recording. You will get most of the information of the presentations, and also the recording will be made available after this webinar. Next appointments, we got another one in April. It's about consumer goods. We will talk about toys, and we will talk about furniture. And then we will move to the topic automotive. Then we will move to agriculture. And in July, we have planned one webinar, an additional one on medicine and hygiene products. So this talk today, it's with 3 experts that are working in the textile applications, coating applications for textiles and fibers. So it's my pleasure to have here Lutz Walter, Secretary General of the ETP, Fibres, Textile Clothing, the European Technology Platform. He will be providing an overview of the different trends, market data, production, consumption, with an overview of where we are going with the market. Then we will move to Willem Utendale and of Centexbel. And Willem will provide basically an overview about the different applications in textile, coating, but also melt spinning. So he will provide an overview of different type of products that you can actually see in which stage of development that Centexbel has been contributing to in the past years. And then we move to Nati Behaptu of International Fragrances and Flavors. Despite of the name, he will be talking about a specific technology that is called Designed Enzymatic Materials, short DEB, and he will explain to us about what it is and what kind of use it can be, let's say, thought about this DEB in different applications. So without further ado, I will just stop the sharing here, and I will give the floor to Lutz. I will put you in the spotlight, Lutz. And you can start sharing your presentation. Just a little bit of housekeeping while Lutz is setting up his own presentation. So during the talk, your microphone is on mute automatically. If during the Q&A you would like to ask questions, you can raise your hand, and then I will change the status of your attendance to speakers and presenters so that you can also speak up. We can also welcome questions in the chat. So the chat is open for everybody, and it can be used anytime, also during the talks. The speakers will ignore the chat during the talks, so they will just go through their own presentations, and then we will look all together at the chat questions after the talks have been finalized. So you can use, in any case, the chat anytime. By the time that the question is raised in your head, just go ahead with that. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome today Lutz Walter. Lutz, you got the floor. Just go ahead. We see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I hope you can see my slides. Very glad to be here and give you a very, very brief intro into the world of textile fibers, basically. which are the materials that pretty much all textile products are made of. And then, I mean, say some very quick words about what we see in the area of bio-based materials for this sector. So, as Chiara said, my name is Lutz Walter. I'm running the organization called Textile ETP in short, which is the European Textile Technology Platform based in Brussels, which is the European Network for Textile Research and Innovation. And obviously, we look at all sorts of different types of textile research and textile innovation, including, of course, the fibers, which are the fundamental building blocks of which we make textile products. So for those of you in the audience, I mean, as you are all here, it seems you're interested in the topic of textiles, but you may not be really an expert in the textile sector as such. So maybe a very quick introduction. When we talk about textiles, especially generalists, very quickly think about, well, that's what we wear. And that is true, but it's not the entire truth. So when we look at the total use of textile fibers in various end applications, we see clothing, apparel, garments, whatever you want to call it, really as a significant share of about between 40 and 45% on a global scale. Then something that many people may still also think of is whatever we call home and interior textiles that represent roughly about 25% share. But then there's a whole other area of very different products that are made out of textile and textile fibers that many people don't even necessarily think about. And they also still represent somewhere in the area of 35 to 40%. These are essentially what we call either technical textiles, so textile materials used in various technical applications in the automotive sector, in the construction sector, in protective devices and so on. We have nonwovens, which are a different type of materials made of textile fibers, used a lot in the medical and hygiene sector, but also in other sectors, again, in construction, in agriculture, it is used. And then we also have composites, fiber-based composites that are obviously, as the name says, made of textile fibers. Not only carbon, but also glass fibers and certain polymer-based fibers. So, so the world of textiles and fibers is actually a very broad one. When we look at the fiber production and consumption, well, you can see that on a global scale, it's a growing sector. So we are looking at approximately 2 to 3% annual growth of total global fiber production. You can see when you look at the chart on the left side that there has been a bit of a shift in the material base. So while in, let's say, 40, 50 years ago, the majority of the fibers that we used in the industry were bio-based natural fibers, especially cotton, this has now completely switched. And now we look at a picture where almost 70% of all the fibers that we use on a global scale across all applications are actually fossil-based, with the very large one being polyester, and then there's a whole set of other fossil synthetic fibers. And then we only look at about 31% of bio-based fibers, of which about 25% made up of the natural fibers, essentially cotton. And then there's also about 5 to 6% that is made up of man-made cellulosics, viscose, and some other fibers. And I'll come back to that. So that's a massive material shift that we have witnessed over the, let's say, 40, 50 years in the textile sector. So you may wonder, well, how will that continue to develop in the future? Because looking in the past is instructive, but looking into the future is what I think interests most people. So we see that global fiber demand will continue to grow. So that means also global fiber production is expected to grow. That's based on global population growth. That is especially based on increasing consumption in the emerging economies. So as people have more disposable income, they can buy more clothing, they move into bigger homes, which they decorate more, and they buy other products, cars, and so on, that all have bigger textile components in it. There's often also a reference to fast fashion, but if you really look under the hood, that is a driver, but it's not such a massive driver because, as I said, well, clothing overall only makes about 40%, and out of that clothing percentage, well, fast fashion is certainly not the biggest percentage. So what we see in fast fashion, we see these latest trends being this and that company that is growing very massively. Often it's a cannibalization of the market, so they take market share from other fashion brands that are less fashionable at a time. So that's a lot of market share competition there. A significant driver that we see is the hygiene and medical applications. Obviously, we're looking at an aging population, not only in Europe, but worldwide. And in that industry, in that sector, a lot of textile materials are being consumed. We also see growth in some of the newer markets, for instance, outdoor, leisure, recreation, agriculture is a significant consumer, environmental protection. And then we see also in certain sector substitution trends where the lighter weight materials, fiber-based materials, composites and so on, replace other traditional materials, such as in the transport sector and construction and so on. So we expect that over the long term, that growth trends of 2 to 3% of fiber production will probably stay in place, at least for the foreseeable future, maybe flattening out over time as global population is growing much more slowly and maybe stagnating at some point. In Europe itself, we're looking actually at a broadly stagnating market. So both clothing and home textile consumption has not been growing in Europe over the last 15 years in volume terms. So we only see some growth in the technical and nonwovens market, but even that is not a very fast growth as far as Europe is concerned. So all this fiber material growth that we see in the coming years is pretty much outside Europe. So, but let's zoom into the bio-based materials a little bit more. So if we want to reduce our dependence on fossil materials in the textile sector, and that is the same obviously in many other sectors, we have two possible routes. We have obviously the recycling route, and I will say a few words about that, and then we have the bio-based materials. Recycling, which plays a significant role in many other sectors that want to reduce sort of virgin material consumption, in textile currently doesn't play a big role at all. So if you look at the percentage of recycled fiber use across the different materials, you see that they're actually quite pathetic. So and even if you dig a little bit deeper, the only fiber that has a somewhat noticeable share of recycling, polyester, is actually virtually 100% bottle to fiber recycling. So it's an open loop system where we are turning PET bottles into polyester fibers, which is in a thermomechanical recycling process, which is pretty well established. But of course, it is something that is maybe not the idea really of a closed loop circular system. When it comes to recycling textiles back into textiles, things are very, very limited today. There's a big push to see that going up. There's regulation coming up in Europe where we may get some mandatory recycled content for clothing products and so on. But still, we don't see that as something that can scale very quickly, both because for technological and also economical reasons. So therefore, I believe that the potential to reduce the fossil fraction is much more on the bio-based material side than actually on the recycling side in total volume terms. So let's look then a little bit deeper into the bio-based side. So, and we see basically three buckets, if you want to say, or three blocks. The first one being the man-made cellulosic fibers. Viscose has been in existence for well over 100 years now. It is a relatively established process. It's a process which has abundant raw material availability. So it's not just wood, there could be also other cellulose containing agriculture and post-consumer waste. Europe is, in terms of man-made fiber production, is in a fairly strong position. So we have some globally leading companies there. There's a big push also, especially from the pulp and paper industry in Scandinavia into also opening the textile fiber market. There is some need for innovation in that area, especially when it comes to the chemicals used in those processes, making closed loop system to recover those chemistries, make sure there's no pollution. Obviously, there's the sustainability profile of the sources of the cellulose or of the wood, so it has to be sustainably sourced. But in terms of fiber properties and also in terms of the knowledge of the whole supply chain of working with these fibers, it is actually something relatively competitive. Then if we look into the second bucket for a moment, biosynthetics and novel biopolymer fibers. So these are either making conventional synthetic fibers such as polyesters, polyamides, elastanes, and so on out of bio-based feedstocks, which is perfectly technically, let's say, chemically possible, but it's often economically still very, very challenging. So we see that as something that can grow over time, especially when using sort of these drop-in principles. But it's something that faces a lot of economic bottlenecks. Whereas on the other side, from a processing point of view, it is pretty easy to bring in a bio-based polyester because it basically reacts in the same way as a conventional polyester. That is different for what we call the novel biopolymers, the PLAs, the PHAs, the PEFs, some of that Willem will talk about, where the properties of the fibers themselves may not be comparable to the fibers that we know, may be inferior to them. And on top of that, obviously, you have the cost issues. So here we rather have challenges of the functionality and of the cost. So this is something that will take longer to scale. And then I'm not talking too much about the natural fibers, because I guess that not many people in this audience here are terribly interested in that sector. Natural fibers still make a significant share, especially cotton in clothing and home textiles will remain a significant fiber, but we don't see a massive potential to scale that on the global level. We can still gain some productivity in agriculture and so on. So there's this possibility to do something. Hemp and especially hemp is something that could see some potential to grow. But I'm going not to go too deeply into that. The thing to really take away is that the key competitive challenges in that replacement of fossil materials is that fossil fibers, fossil-based synthetic fibers are extremely cheap and are also extremely versatile and functional. So it's a very, very hard competition to beat. So, and I see Chiara's coming back on screen. That means I'm running out of time. So I want to finish really with my key takeaways. So fossil carbon represents about 70% of textile materials today. It is still growing. So we're not going away from fossil, we're still going into fossil. So if we want to start phasing it out, it will be a long process. There is demand. There is demand for more sustainable fiber supply, whether recycled or bio-based. So we see that potentially growing faster, but from a smaller base. We see specifically potential for bio-based man-made fibers, but also for biosynthetics, because the industry knows it. They are easier to introduce. The issue is often the pricing side, the economic side. We don't think that fiber-to-fiber recycling is something that can scale very rapidly. So that will not be the solution to defossilize the materials. And what I said, the fiber market is fiercely cost competitive. If you want to go for a material premium, you really have to be in a very specific niche with very specific needs and applications in order to realize that. And never to forget that fiber processing and chemistry and processing chemistry always has to go hand in hand. So if you have a fiber but no chemistry that goes with it, you have basically a non-solution. So that is important. And drop-in solutions, as I mentioned, are a fairly worthwhile route to explore. And with this, I finish. I thank you for your attention. If you want to connect with us, with the Textile ETP, you connect with me personally on LinkedIn. You have the links here. And then later on, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for this overview and also the key messages. I think these are very much appreciated. I would like to ask Willem to put his presentation on the screen, and I will put you in the spotlight so that everybody can see you. Excellent. Yes, we can see the presentation. Thank you, Willem. You got the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Chiara, and thank you, Lutz, for the lovely start of this session with your presentation. So I am Willem Uitendale. I work at Textiles, and like Lutz already shortly mentioned, I will talk about some innovations we do here at Textiles, mainly regarding novel biopolymers such as PLA and PHA. Before I start with that, first a short slide on Textiles. So who are we? So we are a collective research and technical institute for both the textiles and the plastics converting industry. We are located in Belgium, spread over 3 sites, all with our different specialities. And we focus mainly on the one hand, aiding the industry with certain tests, certain certifications, using our testing platforms, and on the other hand, also helping the industry with innovations when it comes to textiles. So we cover the whole value chain, starting from really melt spinning fibers all the way to finishing fabrics and textiles. The goal for today is to focus on 2 of our R&D groups here at Textiles. One of them is on textile coating and finishing, and the next half of the presentation will be about fibers and melt spinning fibers. But I will start with different ways we use biopolymers in textile coatings. One of those ways is bio-based polyurethanes. So this is almost like Lutz mentioned, a drop-in material. So currently, fossil-based polyurethanes and polyurethane dispersions are used quite commonly in textiles. For example, for waterproof clothing like rain jackets, polyurethane coatings are used. What we do here, instead of using a fossil-based component, we replace this component, the polyol, with a bio-based alternative. In this case, for example, a sebacate-based polyol, and we then use this polyol to make polyurethanes. We combine this also with bio-based chain extenders to, in the end, get to polyurethane dispersion in water with a high bio-based content. Of course, here this material is not fully bio-based because we still are working with isocyanates which are not available as fully bio-based materials. The work we did here at Textiles is mainly on improving what is possible with these bio-based polyurethane dispersions and especially improving their washability. So in the end, with these bio-based polyurethanes, we could get to 80 industrial washing cycles, which means that they get washed at 75 degrees 80 times in a row. And even after washing 80 times, we still have a water barrier of more than 1000 millibar, which is the pressure of about 10 meters of water. The dispersions also stay stable, so even after 6 months, we have a perfectly stable bio-based polyurethane dispersion. So this is really a good candidate to replace fossil-based polyurethanes. It has the properties it needs. But of course, as Lutz mentioned, there is a slight premium when it comes to these bio-based polyurethanes. A second development that we worked on quite a bit is artificial leather. So just to give you some background information on artificial leather, usually it consists of 3 main components. We have on the bottom a textile that gives support and strength. On top of that, a bulk layer that really gives the look and the feel of this artificial leather. And then on top, a very thin, transparent varnish that is just there to really change the touch and improve the scratch fastness of the material. Quite often, these artificial leathers are made out of PVC, so PVC plastisols, and then the varnish on top is commonly an acrylate or a PU. What we have done at Centexbel is we developed an alternative for PVC plastisols, which uses PHA, so the biopolymer PHA. We mix it with a plasticizer, and this gives a liquid paste. This paste can then be applied on top of a textile, heated and cured into a homogeneous coating in a way very similar to how PVC plastisols are applied. If we do this with PHA, we get what you see here on the right, which is an artificial leather that really looks like a regular artificial leather made with, for example, a PVC. But this time around, made with PHA. Of course, we did a whole number of tests on these artificial leathers. And for most of the properties, we are really getting to what the market is needing for example, some handbags or things like that for artificial leather. So really abrasion resistance, migration of plasticizer, the strength is all good. The only point of improvement that we still have and that we are working on is Bolyflex, which is a specific kind of flexibility and folding test that artificial leather has to go through, where we reach up to 5,000, well, almost up to 5,000 cycles. This is not good enough yet for example, things like handbags or shoes, but it's the main property we still have to improve, and we feel that with further improvements and new PHA grades reaching the market, that we will be able to get there as well. A second development we have done with these PHA type plastisols is use them as a printing ink, so more specifically in screen printing. Screen printing is a technique quite commonly used in printing clothing. And so with these PHA plastisols, we were able to apply a PHA-based print on top of different types of textiles. And we also have shown that they show good wash fastness at 30, 40, and even 60 degrees. So quite a promising material here, especially because these PHA printing inks are fully biodegradable, which means that if they wash off during laundry, that they really fully biodegrade in the wastewater and wherever they end up. The second half of the other developments that I was going to talk about is about melt spinning fibers. And so there, one of the developments that we worked on quite early is in tea bags. So due to a change in regulation, tea bags had to become compostable and home compostable. And for that reason, we worked together with the Belgian company Sioen to develop for them specific, extremely fine monofilament fibers that weigh, just to give you an idea, 3 grams for a kilometer of fibers. So these are really extremely thin, but they need to be quite strong to keep the tea inside, to keep their shape, and home compostable. And by starting from a PLA and mixing it with different blends of other biopolymers, we could get to a material that is both home compostable and meets the strength requirements of these tea bag fibers, which is 35 centinewton per tex. These were then further commercialized by Sioen and are on the market now as home compostable tea bags. Another development is for agro-textiles. So these are textiles that are used as, for example, ground covers in agriculture. Commonly, these are extruded as some kind of tapes that are then woven into a fabric. Here as well, because they are really used in agriculture, the idea was to have them to be soil compostable. So when they are put down on the ground, they degrade out of their own. Important here as well as they still have the function, what they are designed for, so to really protect what is on top of them. So they need a strength of about 30 centinewton per tex. And what we saw there is that with blends of PHB, with PLA or PBS, we could get quite close to the strength requirements for these agro textiles. And this was then done in cooperation with EFG Cresco. Another development was for offshore aquaculture. So what we think of here mainly is mussel growth, and mussels grow on these kind of ropes that are put down in the sea, commonly using synthetic materials, but it's quite interesting to look at bio-based materials and biodegradable materials for these ropes as well. And what we noticed here is that we could make indeed these ropes out of PLA in a blend with biopolymers such as, for example, PHA, and actually promote muscle growth. So what we saw in sea trials is that we actually had an 85% increase of yield for these mussels on these bio-based ropes. So currently they are still in the final stages of evaluation, but there are quite interested parties to maybe continue with this development. And then the final development I want to talk about is clothing. So here, as Lutz mentioned, a lot of clothing is made using polyester. So for that reason, it's quite interesting to look at PLA as a biopolyester as an alternative for the current fossil-based polyester we use now. Of course, PLA is not a drop-in material, so there was quite a bit of work to be done to make sure that the yarns meet the requirements that are required for clothing, such as a strength of 30 to 35 centinewton per tex and good enough elongation. So what we see with these fibers is that we also have excellent sweat resistance, wash resistance up to 40 degrees. We see if we wash a few times that 60 degrees is possible, but it does change the hand feel of the final clothing. We can color it via dope dyeing with all kinds of different pigments, and can successfully process it into different knits and weaves. And to make sure that also these clothing can be recycled, we also did chemical recycling trials at Futero. So when we had these PLA clothings, we also tried to improve them further. So improving the softness, especially of the material. And we did this by blending them with other biopolyesters in 5 to 25%. And what we saw here is that by blending with 10 or 20% of another biopolyester, that we could obtain these PLA blend fibers that are actually softer than a standard polyester reference that is woven and processed in the same way. So really quite a soft and a comfortable material. And then finally, we made some demonstrators out of these materials to really show that it can be scaled. So together with Meatwill, which produces professional wear, we made a biopolyester knitted polo shirt. And together with a German designer, we made also 70 day shirts. So really quite a nice green shirt using these PLA biopolyester blends. If you're interested in these kind of developments, specifically about clothing, all the information is available on what we call the Hereware Hub. Or of course, you can still get in contact with me or ask some questions later. So to conclude, there are quite a lot of different textile applications possible with novel bio-based and biodegradable materials. For coatings, we are looking at mainly polyurethanes when we think of high-end applications, and PHAs where we think of applications where biodegradability is desired. Think of, for example, the prints on clothing. When it comes to fibers, the majority of the developments is still based on PLA. There is an increasing interest for PHA, but the melt strength of PHA is quite low, which makes it quite difficult to spin PHA-based fibers at the moment. But we do see here at Centex Bell that applications in textiles are constantly growing, mainly when we think of applications that show a need for biodegradability, but even those with durable needs show an increase in growth. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat And with that, I will happily pass on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Willem. You brought a real wealth of examples here. I'm putting together a list of all these resources. So Willem's presentation will be available, but I'm putting together the links and I will put them also into the chat by the end of the day. Yes, we will take the questions after the talk of Nati. So I would pass the floor to Nati. I will put you in the spotlight, Nati, so that everybody can see you. Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Here you go. And we can see you now. And the presentation is also coming. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. You got the floor, Nati. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll also try to be fast because I want to leave enough time for questions. So I'm Nati. I work with a company called IFF, International Flavor and Fragrances. So I want to spend just one slide trying to explain why a company that does flavor and fragrances is in a topic that discusses, non-woven and textile fibers. The one thing that is worth highlighting about this company is that, through various acquisitions, it has grown to have a significant, critical mass around biosciences. And we use today these biotechnological, products in very diverse fields. Typically, if you are washing your clothes, there are enzymes that act and do the cleaning. We make a significant amount of those enzymes. Health products like probiotics, again, are made 1 out of 3 from IFF. We are also in culture. So again, if you are enjoying your yogurt in the morning for your breakfast, typically yogurt is made using cultures. Again, we provide a significant amount of those cultures used for yogurt processing. We sell enzyme and organisms also for the biofuel industry. So again, despite the name, right, International Flavor and Fragrances, through a number of acquisitions, this company now has critical mass in biotechnology. Now, I will tell you and talk and give you a presentation about polysaccharides, right? And we know polysaccharides. We use cotton, right? It's quite relevant for the textile industry. Is cellulose, as well as man-made fibers are cellulose-based. From a chemistry perspective, what is intriguing is this is a beta-1,4 linked polyglucose. If I change the stereochemistry, so from a beta to an alpha linkage, I make an alpha-1,4 polyglucose, and that's starch. So I go from something that is, a structural material that I can build a house with if I want, right, to something that is an energy storage, soluble polysaccharide. In nature, you find a number of diverse polysaccharides, carrageenan, pectin, alginase, locus bingam. Again, there is a diversity of function through a very fine design of polysaccharide that is staggering and inspiring. And so for us, right, we wanted to be able to do these structures, but instead of approaching the extractive nature of current polysaccharide production, we wanted to understand if we can reverse this and really build from ground up. And I'll tell you how we do this. But I also want to mention that of the many structures that we've made, we will focus, at least for the today call, into polyglucose, another polyglucose that is an alpha-1,3 linked polymer. Now, you see the picture of a mushroom, and the reason is this is actually a polysaccharide that occurs in nature. It's part of mushroom cell wall. Clearly, it does not make sense for us to go around the forest, harvest a bunch of mushroom, and extract this polysaccharide. So if we want to really have this material available at scale, the approach needs to change. And that's where the Designed Enzymatic Biomaterials technology comes into play. It is, at high level, deceivingly simple. We use sucrose, that's the white sugar that you add in your coffee or tea, then water, an enzyme, and again, I've premised that we are a company that does quite a lot of biotech. We do know how to make enzymes. And so the enzyme is acting as a catalyst. And then the enzyme polymerizes the glucose component and also releases fructose that is utilized, into as a fermentation media for, as a fuel as well as food. So there is no mass that is lost. An additional step, we can basically connect to the cellulose and starch industry that has developed over a century modification, chemical modification that we can also do on our material. So I want to also spend, a couple of minutes about sucrose, right? Sucrose is a fungible bio feedstock, right? So, we were close to a Third World War, right? Fighting for rare resources that are not, readily available, like oil. If I compare oil to sucrose, right? I have sucrose in Brazil or North America. I have sucrose in Europe. There is a significant amount of beet that is planted, all across Europe. There is sucrose in Asia. So it's not a feedstock. So it's a feedstock that is available, right? And it's cost effective, and it is at scale. And that's very important. Then the transformation is simple. It requires water, sugar, and an enzyme. There is no high pressure, high temperature. So there is simplicity in the transformation. The mass utilization is also efficient. There is no carbon that is lost, right? This is not fermentation, it's an enzymatic polymerization, right? So again, an exciting technology. We have been working on this for quite some time. I also want to spend few elements about carbohydrates and glycochemistry, right? This is a very rich field, right? Again, we make enzymes and proteins, and the excitement about protein is first, we've learned over time how to make it from ground up, controlling all the different, elements that makes the protein. And this gives a design space that is really large. So if I make a trimer, so 3 molecules, attached together, and I ask how many trimers I can make in the protein space with the design space I have, is 8,000. In the carbohydrate space, the same question. I want to make a trimer. What is the combinatorics of the trimer? Is more than 6 million. So if we are excited about the design space of protein, and we are, right? The carbohydrate and the glycoscience space is orders of magnitude larger. So we personally think that this is really a nascent field that, if we learn how to control it, can really enable us to design a number of unique products. And again, nature knows that. Again, that's why we have starch and amylopectin, and we have chitin, and we have cellulose, so on and so forth. Now, as sci-fi may sound, right, and to some extent it's really cool tech, right? I also want to leave the message that we have taken the steps to commercialize some of these products, right? I've mentioned the alpha-1,3. We've also commercialized a soluble version of this material, and we're doing more. So meaning that, yes, the science is cool and we like it, but of course, we are, a corporate, right? A company that needs to really push commercialization. And we push commercialization by making plants that are at scale and can generate, hundreds to thousands of tons of polymer consistently with high purity, stability, and with the right regulatory registrations milestone to really be able to sell this product. So again, we've been in this journey for quite some time, but the take-home message is this is commercial. So let me now connect it in the last few minutes about how this technology can be relevant for textile and non-woven, right? Again, this technology is relevant for many other fields, and we are actively working in a number of areas, but we also believe that the area of textile is of interest for this technology. The one thing that we've done, again, as a proof of concept is really, if I have a substrate, and there are many substrates nowadays, both non-woven as well as woven substrate that are synthetic. Again, if you remember the presentation from the first talk, right? We went from being mostly, cotton and wool based to now have 70% of our textile to be polyester. And polyester is great mechanical properties, thermal stability, so on and so forth. The one thing that polyester or polyolefin you use, for example, in an ADL for a diaper, are not hydrophilic, right? And so a lot of time, this material need to be treated to improve the hydrophilicity. The treatment can often be an acrylic petro-based treatment, can be PVOH, can be surfactant. What we are showing here is that if we treat these hydrophobic woven and non-woven structures with these DEB polysaccharides that are in this alpha-1,3 version water insoluble, so this is really a permanent treatment that we can apply, then we can really design the wicking and water management behavior of this final structure. And this is just a couple of examples on how we can, literally, print channels as well as significantly change the wicking behavior of a structure that is fairly hydrophobic to begin with. The other thing that I want to leave you as a message about this technology is, again, in its water-insoluble version, this alpha-1,3 material, it can be a fiber-forming polymer. You see here actual fibers that we've spun. This is the cross-section. This animal cracker-like structure is reminiscent of viscose fiber, and this is a woven structure created 100% by this alpha-1,3 polymer. So we are able to create a novel homofiber category. I'll show you in the next slide how it has a unique behavior when it comes to moisture and thermal management. It's bio-based and biodegradable. It's a polysaccharide, right? So it's not surprising that the material has this behavior. From a process perspective, you can really envision a direct conversion of saccharide sugar to a fiber. From a spinning perspective, clearly it uses what is known in the industry, which is wet spinning used for man-made fibers. But unlike cellulose, it does not require carbon bisulfite or NMMO in its spinning process. So it's really a water-based where you play with pH to make, to solubilize and make it insoluble. From a sustainability perspective, this enables, feedstock diversification. If you use, sucrose from Europe, right, it will be a non-GMO feedstock. And again, it leverages sources that are at scale in various regions. So just one last slide about the performance of this material. It is a polysaccharide, so it tends to manage moisture. But again, I was telling you at the beginning, slight changes in the stereochemistry of the linkage can make a big impact in this polysaccharide. So specifically here, what we are showing is the exotherm. So basically the heat associated as moisture is absorbed. Clearly, polyester is fairly poor. It doesn't absorb moisture. It makes sense. Cotton is better. But we know, right, if you ask, okay, what is the high-end fiber that we wear, right, is wool in its cashmere form, right? And the comfort associated with wool is really through this absorption and desorption exotherm. So it regulates the heat, right? It heats up when it's needed by absorbing water, and it cools down, releasing water. What you are seeing here are just IR images, so they are temperature gradient. So the samples were conditioned at low relative humidity, and then the relative humidity has been changed to be high, and then at high relative humidity, the material is absorbing moisture and it's heating up. And what you see compared to lyocell, viscose, and cotton, this DEB fiber has a thermal management, so the heat up as well as the opposite, the cool down, that is even higher. Okay, and property-wise, it has again comparable properties in terms of moisture absorption, tensile, and elongation to what is found in wool. Okay, so with this I conclude because I know that we do want to have some time for questions. Thank you.